Staying with us right here on NTV Uganda, my name is Romeo Busika, and of course I come with a very pertinent conversation, and that is the COVID-19 pandemic. It is causing untold suffering among the 7.6 billion citizens that roam this earth. I mean, we are talking about an uptick in COVID-19 cases all over the world. 172.6 million cases have been registered on the global scale. You wouldn't believe. And the United States is taking the biggest chunk of those cases, over 33.5 million plus cases of COVID-19. You do have India with 28.7 million plus cases of COVID-19, and the third most burdened country being Brazil with some 16.8 million plus cases of COVID-19. Here in Uganda, we are now grappling with 51,676 cases of COVID-19, and luckily 374 people have succumbed to the novel coronavirus. On the international stage, over 3.5 million plus people have died as a result of this coronavirus disease. So we are here on Citizens' Voices to actually expand more on the impact of the COVID-19 disease on the citizens living here in Uganda. How many people have been affected? How was the situation during the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic? We're talking about the lockdown in March of 2020. And now, is the situation any different? Or has the suffering actually increased for so many of the individuals in this country? We do know many people have slipped into poverty. Over 3 million people have slipped into poverty. Yes, school closures have affected more girls than boys. We've seen cases of teenage pregnancies rise exponentially right here in this country of ours, the Pearl of Africa. But then you, as a citizen who is watching this show, Citizen Voices, I'm sure you have your own reasons as to why you think maybe boys were affected more than girls, and maybe girls were affected more than the boys in that case. And we do have some of the views coming in from some of the citizens of this country who were speaking to us before we get into the nitty-gritties of this show. Before we talk to those individuals, let me introduce my guests on the show today. I do have David Kavanda. David Kavanda is the Executive Director, Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. He's also joined by, that is Marina Nyanzi. Yes, she is the Senior Program Officer with Sauti za Wananchi. So first off, before we get into the nitty-gritties of this show, talking about the social impact of the COVID-19 disease on the citizens of this country, let's talk to some of the people on the streets whom we managed to seek and get their views on this particular topic, the impact of COVID-19 on their lives. Listen in.
My name is Alfred Andama. I actually come from Arua, though I am within for assignments here. When COVID came, I was for studies. So it slowed down my pace. Everything came down. We were about 2 weeks towards doing exams. So everything had to calm down. We stayed home for more than 7-8 months until we had to come and sit again our exams. And finally we were able to get done. But also again with work, now many people have been pushed out of work. They cannot come to work. They want very, very essential people to be at work. And this has not only affected me, but also the people I stay with, the people I relate with. So somewhere, somehow, economically, you don't have to support yourself alone, but also support other people too. So that is how COVID has affected me, and you can see we are all putting on masks everywhere. You cannot be sure of your neighbor, your friends are dying, your neighbors are dying, your relatives are dying. It is a very stressful thing, really. So that is how COVID has affected us, not only financially, but emotionally, physically too. We are losing so many things. So really we pray that things will calm down at some point. That is our heart's desire, really. I think that's what I can say.
Amanya bampita bene katiri banzara mu western ntungamo kofideja empisiza bubi nnyo obwavu bungi ate n'ekirala ekisinga kunduma abaana obutasoma leka tubazeemu nibabaggalo nibagamba era owange wa PC yadde agenda kuddayo mande era bazeemu nibakola ki nibabaggala nibagaa tebagendayo kusoma n'ate ndaba private schools ate mulimu abasomesa naye ffe batunyigiriza nnyo nga ffe amasomero gaffe bagatunyigiriza nnyo sigadde ndi bene katiri.
I'm Abdul Sulaiman Aswi from Wakiso town. I'm here to talk about COVID-19, how it has affected me up. In 2019, I had to graduate from YMCA, but I lost up my graduation thing because the school had to cancel it up because of COVID-19. During that process, the lockdown and everything, I used up the money for graduation, and no one could support me from my parents, my dad. You know, everyone was so down. I'm still looking up for something to do, and yeah, to finish up what I started off by graduating off and finishing up my studies.
Amanya gange bampita Sekajja Twaha kolera mulagaawo ku stage ya boda boda. COVID ono tatuyisiza bulungi okutwaliza awamu olw'embeera nti tuli mu kunyigirizibwa nga ffe aba boda boda, ate nga tulina okuzaayo abaana baffe mu masomero nga bw'olaba nti tubazaayo mu bitundutundu. Kale ne tusangibwa nti oba okyakola akolako bw'oti abantu bwe banyukira, ate gwe oba olina kugendaka. Ekitandibadde nti singa baba batwongeddeyoko obudde wakiri ne tunyuka ssaawa nga 2, kisobolesa okufunira abantu baffe akasente, kubanga ebiseera by'emisana bino bye tubeeramu tebibeeramu ssente. Naye ebiseera bya kawungeezi awo ng'abantu banyuka, ow'omwowina avaayo n'ow'ennakasero n'ow'omwakeedi, omuntu wafunirayo omutwalo. N'olwekyo abantu baffe tuli bubi nnyo, naddala ffe aba boda boda, ate nga tuli bangi nga bwe mutulaba. Katusaba gavumenti yaffe eno etuyambe etwongezeyoko ku ssaawa tusobole okuba nga kitubeerera obulungi, okusobola okuzza abaana baffe mu masomero nga bwe mulaba nti baddayo, ate nga COVID waali si wakuvaawo. Tulina okufuna embeera emumanyiira tusobozesa okuba nga tutambuza obulamu nga tetunyigirizibwa.
My name is Ilman Ali Mahmoud. I'm a student at Cavendish University, and COVID-19 has affected my life, like emotionally, past stress, everything, because you can't go outside easily, you can't meet with friends, family. Also, it affected me as economically, because like family, they can't send you like easily, they can't send you money easily because they don't work, they don't have, because it's a lockdown, everywhere it's a lockdown, so it will be so difficult for them also. And I just have to sit there and think, what is this and why all is this happening of my life, and yeah, like I think we will recover and this thing will go and everything will come back as usual. Stay strong and be strong.
Amanya nze Galiwango Muhammad. Ekituufu kiri nti COVID atuyisiza ddala bubi nnyo. Ekisookera ddala twali tukola ekiro, kubanza envuga boda twali tukola ekiro ku mabalo okugeza nga lapolonizi wali eri nga tuvuga abantu baffe, abantu tebakyakola, amabala bagaggala. Ekyokubiri, tetukyayingizanga luli, embeera yayonooneka buli kimu. Abantu abasaabaza abamu batya n'okulinnya boda bagamba mu COVID tumutambuza. Ekyokusatu, newankubadde ki twalina looni zaffe mu mabanka, looni ezo zitumenye nnyo okusasula, ate baba amabanka bongezaamu amagoba mangi, tebatunuddeemu mu mbeera ndala. Kati saawa eno nali nvuga piki ya looni, pikipiki eya looni, na kati saawa eno tennaggwayo ate era baagala nsasule ne ziri ezaki eza COVID bo ezaabwe baba bazaagala. Ekirala okugeza maama wange oyo mulaba gyasula yamala emyezi 5 nga tabasasula eja COVID, ne bamugoba mu nju n'ebintu bye ne bakola ki, ne babiwamba. COVID atuyisiriza ddala bubi.
The show you're watching is Citizen Voices, and those are some of the views of the citizens of this country who are narrating the ordeal COVID-19 has actually befallen on this economy and the health of so many of the people within this country. Well, according to the survey by Sauti za Wananchi, over 79% of the citizens within this country believe that the case of teenage pregnancies are rising exponentially within this country, and they say the school closures within this country affected more girls than the boys, simply because of that prerogative. The fact that more girls were actually getting married early, yes, as young teenagers, and were getting pregnant at an early age, meaning it was harder for such individuals to get back into the school setting. Meaning, according to our citizens, they are saying 64%. They are saying that our school closures affected more girls than the boys. But then 2% of the entire population in Uganda believes that boys were affected more than the girls. What do you think? reach out to us right on our NTV Uganda pages, that is on Facebook and Twitter. Let me bring in our guests. We do have David Kabanda. He is the Executive Director, Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. We also have Marina Nyanzi. She is the Program Manager from Sauti za Wananchi, both of whom join me right now on set to expand more on this very pertinent conversation. Marina Nyanzi, as the Program Officer, Senior Program Officer, expand more on this research, the impact of COVID-19 on the citizens of this country. We had such discussions last year during the onset of the pandemic. The situation was not so dire as we speak right now. Expand more where we are.
Okay. Thank you, Romeo, for hosting this show. Well, the COVID pandemic has definitely had a lot of effects on us in Uganda. First of all, we've seen that the proportion of citizens across the entire country who say that the teenage pregnancies have gone up is high. That is 79% of them. And then we see that 51% say that they've had an experience of physical violence within their community. And then 51% have also experienced some emotional violence within their community. Then 46% have experienced sexual violence within their community. And when it comes to the sexual violence, we see that this is mentioned more by those in the urban compared to the rural, which again continues to show us that the urban dwellers are greatly affected by the pandemic because this affects their livelihoods. A number of them had their businesses shut down. That is around 4 in 10 Ugandans say that their businesses were closed during the pandemic. And right now we can only guess how many of those have actually managed to reopen, or when they reopened, are they still standing? We've seen that a number of them have actually not managed to sustain the business operations because there are issues to do with the rent, which remained high even after the businesses were allowed to open. So there are still a number of challenges that Ugandans are facing.
Indeed, and the viewer who is watching would like to just understand why that is, that the people in the rural areas don't feel like sexual exploitation has been much of a bigger problem, or sexual abuse and so forth, than the people in the urban areas.
Well, what we see is that the number of those that are saying that that is happening in the rural areas, we see that about 52%, a half of those in the urban are experiencing some form of sexual violence. And this is only, when you compare with the rural, this is only 44%. So it could be that in the urban dwelling, a number of people have to depend on daily income to sustain their household. When you compare with the rural, who actually have maybe a garden, they can go get the food. So if at all you find that the head of the household is frustrated that he has no income, it's quite likely that that could now turn into sexual violence. But again, the other thing that we usually don't mention a lot, there is the issue of the anxiety, the depression.
I see.
This we have not picked the figures here, but now you can only imagine how many people actually experiencing that anxiety, that they've lost a loved one, because COVID sometimes for a number of people, they look at it like, oh, it's a flu or it's just pneumonia. But when your loved one is taken away, how do you recover? How much support is being given to people to actually go through this grieving? And are they able to remain productive as they go through the grief? I think that is something that probably the ministry has talked about, that they have a number of services available. But I think Ugandans need to probably know, is this free or do we have to pay for that? And if someone has to pay for that, then I think that is the deeper challenge that we will face even post this current wave that we are going through, that a number of people will probably be unproductive because of the grief that they experience.
Would it be safe to surmise that the situation has grown definitely dire since the onset of the pandemic up to now?
Yes, it has. It has grown dire because we've seen also in our data that depression is anxiety is one of the challenges that Ugandans say that they're experiencing. In the past, we would not see such figures coming up. And also the records from, I think, the Ministry of Health have also showed that they are now paying more attention to that. But then what happens to
And of course, another survey, based on your survey, during the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we could see family members, friends, rush to the rescue of other family members who are in dire constraints. But then according to your survey, this is not happening. When a family is, grappling with financial constraints, they have to do it on their own. Maybe cut spending and not, rush to the defense of other people like we saw during the onset of the pandemic. Why?
Well, I think what happens is that under normal circumstances, when everyone is doing well, you will easily run to your friend and ask for help. But when your friend gets in that tough spot between a rock and a hard place, then your friend won't want to help you. You probably have to rely on family because
meaning
our culture,
we are all in the same position now.
You're all in the same position, but now it's only those that are required or they cannot shy away from helping you that will help you. That is strictly the family. And we saw that with the onset of the initial lockdown in March last year, that now people are turning to their family and not so much of friends. Yet at the start of the year, they were relying on both friends and family when they were short of cash to take care of their households. So it's challenging.
Indeed. Mari Nanyanzi is a senior program officer with Sauti za Wananchi, and this conversation is largely centered around expanding more on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the citizens of this country. Like I did say, cases of COVID-19 are rising exponentially. The government is even mulling the possibility of a second lockdown. But before we even go into the possibility of a second lockdown, even the first one is still here. The artists are not allowed to go to bars and so forth. So as it is, people are still grappling with this partial lockdown as it is. So what has been the impact? What is the perception of the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights on this particular conversation? We have the Executive Director, David Kabanda, and is going to be sharing with us his perspective on this issue. David Kabanda, the impact of COVID-19 on our citizens. Yes.
Thank you so much, Romeo. The impact is deep.
Indeed.
I should say. We all remember when we had just been locked down last year, government attempted to even give out some food handouts.
Indeed.
Which didn't work out well because many people were never given. And in our organization, actually carried out some research within Wachiso district. And it was so alarming that over 85% of the people were in acute food insecurity. And it has gone on and on because of the social disruptions that have happened over time. Many people have lost jobs. Many people cannot find that social capital and protection.
Indeed.
So many people are, by the way, dying. And we would want also to
because
ask
of hunger.
the government. Yes, because of
not
hunger.
even COVID.
Yes, there are those families where we have gone and found that they were eating banana peelings. So they go and pick banana peelings from the garbage pit, and then they cut out that white lining, and then they cook it sometimes. So we had those families.
So if COVID-19 doesn't kill you, hunger is coming.
Then hunger will kill you.
And
you see, it is happening at a time when we still had food insecurity in some places. And this one is trying to excavate the problem. So in looking at all this as the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights, we find that there is something that needs to be done, and government knows what to do.
This is what I want to understand, David Kabanda.
Yes.
According to the survey by Sauti za Wananchi, food was the biggest aid to the citizens of this country. It was food. So when we talk about hunger killing our people, then I do not understand. Was that food aid insufficient?
First of all, the methodology was wrong.
I see.
And we also talked to government that because they chose to give food to Wachiso and some
urban centers,
Wachiso, Kampala, and some parts of Mukono, although many of those people also didn't.
What was their reasoning?
That was number one. They said that, you see, it is the urban people who are facing the bigger challenge. Those people in the countryside can access food, failing to understand the vulnerability index in this country.
Help them understand that, because the problem persists.
Yeah, the problem goes on, but there is also another challenge within a challenge.
Yes, David.
That people started donating food. You remember how people were donating food? And we again warned the government that you cannot just open up to receive food which is not tested. Before they could even start distributing food, UNBS came up and said 38% of that food that you've received is contaminated.
I see.
And then the government couldn't go ahead to distribute that food. So we have food safety issues and then food security issues. So every problem comes in. So the COVID-19 has just opened us there to show that we don't have resilient systems, that food systems, and I think it is already time that government discusses and unpacks these challenges.
The president himself in January promised us that maybe there could be a second distribution of food that we could be seeing in the offing.
Yeah, and of course this is amazing to hear from the president. But what happens when he speaks doesn't, transcend into actual, distribution of food. I also heard him say, we are going to give people food, and who are happy, thinking that maybe they've learned from some mistakes before. Now this time we'll see, a much more organized, systematic way of giving food to the vulnerable. But nothing has happened.
David Kabanda is the Executive Director, Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. He's not alone. We also have Marina Nyanzi, very, very intelligent, Senior Program Officer with Sauti za Wananchi, and we're expounding more on the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic on the citizens of this country. This is a pertinent conversation now that the COVID-19 cases are rising exponentially. 51,676 cases. 374 people have died. On the international scale, we are talking about 172.6 million. 172.6 million, that's a big number. The US is talking about 33.5 million. India, 28.7 million. Brazil, 16.8 million. So we need to do what we need to be doing as government to help people cushion themselves from the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic. We're expanding more on this conversation shortly after this breather. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Citizen Voices. My name is Romeo Busika, and we are still here expounding more on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the citizens of this country. What should government be doing to cushion the citizens of this country from the harmful impact of the COVID-19 pandemic? I still have David Kabanda. He is the Executive Director, Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. Marina Nyanzi, she is the Senior Program Officer, Sauti za Wananchi, both of whom are still here with me in studio. Now, Mr. Kabanda, before we went for a break, we were talking about how urban households received more help from government and NGOs than the rural areas, based on the assumption that the rural areas were still engaged in agriculture and would be able to keep food on the table. Wasn't that a misconception?
It continues to be a misconception by the up to now, because the rural economy depends heavily on the urban economy. The concentration of inputs and everything is here in the center. And when we had the lockdown, the extension workers had to also run back to their homes. Indeed. These are people who are posted in districts and they had to run away. To help the farmers with yes. If I have my mother, for example, in Nakasongolo, where she will wait for me to send the seeds. That didn't happen. And you realize that the traditional food seed system is also broken. But this is what we have been asking government to do, and we continuously ask. In the 1995 Constitution, you understand, we have provision for strategic food reserves. In fact, we do not need government to give people handouts. What we need government is to put up that system of food reserves, where people can be able to get food at subsidized prices.
I see.
Yes, it is very possible, but we don't know why government has consistently refused to do that. But we will continue to remind them and also ask them to do that. Because whether in urban or in rural areas, we have the same problem. Right now, Romeo, in the break we've been discussing, you realize that there is a trend. Many people are not in towns.
Indeed.
If government
there is an exodus just like December last year.
Yes.
Because of the anticipated lockdown.
People are running back. So, and if you must now plan, you must not only plan for Kampala and Wachiso, you must plan for villages, because the virus has
now been exported
already.
Indeed.
So we have a problem, And unless we come up with vivid, compassionate, but also robust...
Of course, you mentioned COVID-19, and we do know that the citizens of this country are self-medicating on organic herbs. Yeah. One too many times you've seen someone on a TV station or radio station touting an organic herb, saying this will go a long way in alleviating the challenges that COVID-19 brings about. Isn't this a big challenge for our citizens?
It is a critical, big challenge, but it comes with another
in terms of certification
opportunity. If you realize right now, when you see on social media everywhere, people are self-medicating. There is a lot of traditional knowledge, first of all, on what should heal what, in terms of herbs and everything. But another big challenge is many people are stealing from people now. First of all, selling them things that don't work. We have the Traditional and Complementary Medicines Act. Section in there require a minister to come up with regulations. This is the time. If a certain herb X works well on maybe a virus or what, the ministry should be coming out. You don't wait for Kavandas to sue you, because that is going to happen. If I use a particular herb X from someone who has been advertising and you've not stopped them and you've not given me guidance, what do you want us to do? Some of us as public-spirited individuals are going to take you to court. We have nothing to do. But for me, I want to speak to the powers that there is an opportunity here, a golden opportunity. You come up, Dr. Nambati, I know that you deal with this. Come up and give guidance on these herbs that we hear about.
And she's working on a herb herself. I'm just waiting for that development.
I think you should.
For the last 3 months, she's been working on a herb.
Yes, you should bring her here to speak to us.
I will look for her.
Yes, and I'm looking at adequate living. I'm telling you, Romeo, many people are in homes. They have anxiety. Others have lost people. You see, the other time we were happy thinking that it is only affecting adults, but it is affecting children. It is affecting people in youthful stage of their lives, a time when we should be working. Families are losing parents, and children are, everyone is in that state of fear.
Thank you very much, David Kavanda. Mari Nanyons, he mentions a very pertinent conversation. He talks about poverty levels rising, food insecurity, and so forth. And we all do know that all this leads to rising teenage pregnancies. When a family cannot feed itself, they'll look at the young girl within its group and they'll be like, okay, you're 18, you're 19, you're 20, you can go out there and make some money. Prostitution, rising teenage pregnancies. How bad is the situation as we speak?
Well, the data has showed us that 79% of the adults say that they've experienced or they have noticed that teenage pregnancy is actually happening within their community. So if at all that is happening, and then we also have the domestic violence, then it means that as we get into the suspected lockdown, then it will increase. And again, of course, there is the fear that schools are probably not going to open. Because some schools are supposed to open on Monday, but that's likely not to happen because of the current wave that we have. So it does not shed a bright picture. I think it's important that communities stand together, or even parents stand together in a community and try and find solutions on how to keep their children busy. The other thing that I think about when I look at the teenage pregnancies and also maybe what is happening, how parents are trying to keep their children busy. We see that a number of schools, at least in the urban, they took on the e-learning. But in many cases, this e-learning was more of, I don't like to use the word redundant, but it looks like it was redundant because a child could probably study for 3 months, but after that, they are not promoted to the next class. So why is a parent actually spending money? And then nothing happens. So it's probably wiser that the schools that are, or should I say the public schools, those that are following the Uganda curriculum, they should ensure that when you do the e-learning, let these children get promoted, because it's very heartbreaking to see that children have been seated at home for more than a year now. Someone has been in P2 or P4 for the last, God knows, since since 2020.
Indeed, Mari, let's expand more on the psychological distress that the COVID-19 has wrought on our children. We're talking about rising cases of alcohol abuse, alcohol consumption, drug abuse and so forth, over 50%. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the data has showed us that there is a rising number of those that are actually abusing substances, because we are seeing that about 58% said that the alcohol consumption went up within their community, that it got worse. And then 49% said that the drug use and abuse has actually also gone up within their community. So if at all children are experiencing this and they don't have that safety or that cushion that they usually get at school, then it really sheds a picture that post the pandemic, we are likely to see a lot of stressed children because their parents have probably been abusive to them. And the parents are also being abusive because they are probably experiencing a lot of pressure to keep the household going, and also worrying about how to cater for these children, because
and more of this pressure is in the urban centers than rural areas.
Yes, because at the start, parents have this thinking that, this wrong thinking that if at all I pay the school fees, drop the child at school, the teachers will take care of that.
See.
But right now you find that the child has to be at home, probably stay there with the help or the other siblings or relatives, and they have to keep reporting the cases of bad behavior and so on. So it becomes very stressful for parents. So when we look at all this, you really see that we need a lot of psychosocial support for the families as we go through this. And we have not seen a strong emphasis on this for Ugandans on how to cope.
Of course, even the parents themselves are struggling exponentially. 1 out of 10 citizens have no work to go back to. Now that we are talking about a second lockdown, a possibility of a second lockdown, it might get more complicated for the parents.
Yeah.
Expand more on that.
So during the initial lockdown, we saw that about 6 in 10 businesses continued to operate.
Indeed.
Then 4 in 10 said that businesses had actually closed during that time. And when we try to establish of those that have actually closed, how many had a hope that, they will be able to start again. About 10% of those said that they had no hope whatsoever that they will actually get back into operation. So it shows us that there is a lot of support that was probably promised. We've heard of the myogas and so on to help, like stimulus packages to help Ugandans get back on their feet. But how are these different programs operating? Is there enough information for Ugandans to know about this? Other research that we've conducted has shown us that about 7 in 10 Ugandans are not aware of the different development programs available. And for them, the source of information is the LC1. So the question is the LC1 aware that these programs are actually happening? I observed something some time back. There's a lady, an elderly lady, who was talking about, I need to go and register somewhere. They told us that everyone in this area should go and register. So we asked her, why are you going to register? What is it that you're going to register for? She said, the president said that they're going to give us money. Then she said, but no, they told us that it's a money lending thing. But they told us we are supposed to move to. So even what is there is not clear for most Ugandans. And I think that creates a lot of ambiguity and room for exploitation.
And so of course, another compelling development from the Southeast Wananchi survey actually pertains to the fact that more people in the rural areas continue with some form of work than the people in the urban areas. Expand more on that, Mari. How come?
Yes, so what happens is that when you're in the rural area, a number of people are sustained by agriculture. So that continued to operate, to go on as the lockdowns were happening in the urban centers. But again, we have seen from the recently released report from UBOS, that is the National Household Survey 2019-2020, that the number of Ugandans that were actually getting into agriculture shot up during the pandemic. That is, I think it moved up to about 52%. From around 40-something, and those that were in formal employment, that number actually dropped. So we can say that there's a bit of positive coming out of the pandemic, that people are now moving more into agriculture. But then when they move into that, are they able to get the support that they need to sustain this new activity.
I understand. Marina Nyanzi, Senior Program Officer with Sauti za Wananchi. David Kavanda,
Yes.
Agriculture was largely unperturbed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Shouldn't we be focusing more on helping the people who are engaged within agriculture to actually give them the tools so that they could sustain themselves, even when a second lockdown is in the offing? Should we be focusing on the agricultural sector?
Yes.
Capacity building,
yes,
human capital development.
To protect the people and make sure that at least you cushion them from all these challenges and the effects of COVID-19. Many people, by the way, even in the urban, are running to agriculture. But you see, the controversy in there is whether they can be able to get some income. You all know that recently maize, a kilo of maize has been going as low as 300. And many people don't see. You see, but the only thing is, if someone is in agriculture, they will continue in there.
Yeah.
So we would see government come in to subsidize on inputs and also increase the number. Because we've been, chanting this song about extension workers. Government promised us extension workers per sub-county, but this has not been happening.
But do you think we are dealing with poor planners, Mr. David Kavanda? You have agriculture that took in this budget only 590 billion Uganda shillings.
That's some kind of priority that sometimes I don't understand, but for us...
Because we are talking about a sector that contributes 21% of the GDP to the economy. So we were like, so why are you giving it meager funding? If many people are largely banking on agriculture, shouldn't we be seeing most of this budget going to that sector so that people can cushion themselves? Shouldn't we be seeing more money going to the health sector so that people can cushion themselves and not experiment on these organic herbs? David?
Yeah. So, and also, you should also know, Romeo, that there is a sector that has not been actually unpacked to the people. Exporting of organic products from Uganda.
Yes.
We are number 2, by the way, in the entire world.
After India, yes.
You understand?
Indeed.
So you ask yourself, why shouldn't government interest in itself
It's mind-boggling.
in promoting this gold mine?
Indeed.
Many people would be okay, by the way. The only few Ugandans who are engaged in that trade are wealthy. They are okay. And of course, it is even promoting health living. It is promoting, prevention of non-communicable diseases. It is promoting nature and everything. So we think that we need to ask Mr. Government to use the opportunities that are available. Another opportunity that I wanted to speak about is we have some legal framework that we can use.
All right.
For example, right now, people are feeding on food that is not safe. I should tell you that.
Indeed, yes.
If we could have, for example, regulation where we are now, a statutory instrument, for example, from Ministry of Health, to guide on the kind of food, where should you buy it, nutrition labeling, for example, if you went to buy something today, it must be, certified and the nutrients are clearly labeled such that the immunity of people is not compromised.
All right, it's 8:48. We need to vacate this area to make room for NTV tonight. But before I go, let's talk about recommendations, David Kavanda, moving forward. The likelihood of a second lockdown. Should we be calling for one now that cases are rising exponentially? Even though the first lockdown had very immense bad impact on our people, should we be talking about a second lockdown?
I will quickly tell you we don't need one. What we need is strict observance of the SOPs. The moment you lock people down this time without rectifying some of the issues that we've been talking about, you are causing more death.
All right, Marina Nyanzi, school closures in the initial lockdown. Who was affected more, boys or girls?
According to our data, both boys and girls were affected, but it's the girls that actually were impacted more.
Because of what factors?
Than the boys. Because of the aspects of the teenage pregnancy, because now they didn't have someone to chaperone them or to watch over them as the parents went about looking for an income. So it's largely the girls that were most affected.
So based on that background, would you, as Marina Nyanzi or Sauti za Wananchi, advocate for the second lockdown now that cases are rising exponentially? You have new variants of the COVID-19 disease that are not affecting only the older population, but even the younger ones are being put down. Yes.
Well, I think that given the science of how to stop a pandemic, there is a need for Ugandans to first of all observe the SOPs. And when there is a failure to observe those, then you need to go to tougher measures, like have them controlled, because like Mr. Kabanda mentioned, now already the virus has been exported to the rural areas where Ugandans are now running to. So that puts us in a tougher situation. We need to have people contained so that we are able to know who is actually affected. Let them go through that period of maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we are able to identify those cases and then move on with our lives. But bottom line, we need to observe the SOPs. In whichever location you're in, you need to observe the SOPs.
All right, let me get your last parting shots in the last 2 minutes. David Kabanda, as we move forward, talk to the people of this nation before I let you go. Your last parting shots.
I want to ask everyone to be very cautious, but don't fear too much, because when you fear too much, then you lose the battle.
Indeed.
So I want to ask everyone to observe standard operating procedures. Please eat safe food. Don't just eat. Make sure when you buy food, the labels are clear. Don't buy expired food. And when you decide to eat health foods from your gardens or from a local market.
Marina Nyanzi, final recommendation or parting shots from Saudi Zawani.
My parting shot is that we should continue to follow the standard operating procedures, social distance, wear a mask, sanitize your hands. But again, beyond that, if at all you have a suspected coronavirus case, have that reported to the health center so that we can be able to contain it and not have more people contaminated.
And that thought puts a cap on this conversation. My name is Romy Busiku. I couldn't be more proud to have had this conversation with Marina Nyanzi and David Kabanda in the wake of the COVID-19 cases that are rising exponentially within this country. We are talking about 51,676 cases of COVID-19. Out of those, 374 people have actually succumbed. On the global stage, over 3.5 million people have died because of this COVID-19 disease. And the cases on the global stage are now kept at 172.6 million plus cases of COVID-19. The US takes the biggest chunk of those cases with 33.5 million. You do have India with 28.7 million. And thirdly, Brazil with 16.8 million plus cases of COVID-19. The biggest bet to cushion ourselves from a second lockdown is the face mask and ensuring social distancing of 2 to 3 meters. My name is Romy Busiku. Have yourselves a blessed night.